I'm going to be talking to Mohua Mukherjee, who is a senior research fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, about her new research paper, India's Mass Market Clean Mobility Initiatives and its unique customized business models for light electric vehicles. So welcome to the interview, Mohua.
Thank you so much, Markham. Thank you very much.
Well, look, why don't we start with an overview of your paper? Because I find this fascinating. There's I think it's around over 1 billion people in India. There already is a transportation model. Electric vehicles are coming in. All sorts of electric vehicles are now available. So, and the question now is how to electrify transportation that makes sense for Indian people. So maybe just give us an overview of your paper, please.
Okay, sure. I'd be glad to do that. I think the key point that the paper is trying to make is that unlike countries such as Norway or the United States or other European countries where the electrification of transport has focused on four-wheel passenger cars, India has to find its own path for decarbonizing transport. And that's because around 85% of the private vehicles that run on the roads today are actually what we call two-wheelers. And there is also a fair number of three-wheelers, which is in Southeast Asia referred to as tuk-tuks, just so that your viewers know what I'm talking about for a three-wheeler. Those are the modes of transport that are used by far the majority of the population. We have over 1 billion people. So within the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, I am particularly looking at the budget segment of that. This is the people who need to find transport that is as affordable as possible. And some people also earn their livelihoods from their two-wheelers. They, particularly since the COVID pandemic, lots of jobs were lost. So people who were in possession of one of these quickly signed up as delivery drivers. Particularly the two-wheelers, which used to be their personal commuting vehicle to work. They no longer have the job. So they quickly signed up to earn their livelihood from that as delivery of e-commerce or meals, etc. So the question is, how do we get these people or others like them to choose to buy an electric two-wheeler next time round? And one thing that's happening is the Indian government has raised their fuel prices. So lots of people are now thinking that the electric vehicle is very attractive. So electric two-wheeler and electric three-wheeler is the subject of the paper.
So if I understand this correctly, there are plenty of two-wheel and three-wheel vehicles that are not just pedal bicycles. These are their scooters, they're small motorcycles, those sorts of vehicles. And I would imagine that in big cities, that's got to be a significant source of pollution, another incentive to switch over to electric.
Exactly. Right now, only 1% of the vehicles running on the roads in India are actually electric. Everything else is the so-called ICE vehicle, the internal combustion engine that runs on petrol or diesel. So as I mentioned, the costs have nearly doubled for petrol and diesel due to very high taxes that have been slapped on fossil fuels. So therefore, there's been a lot of interest in trying to see what the total cost of ownership is like for an electric vehicle. And in particular, what the paper goes into is that the government also has a very generous subsidy program, which is called the FAME, Faster Adoption of Manufacturing and Electric Vehicles. After the subsidy, and the most basic budget model would cost you $800 for the body of the vehicle and $800 again for the lithium-ion battery that it runs on. So $1,600 after subsidy would be the cost of acquisition of the one with the most low version of battery with only maybe 50 kilometers range. So what we find is that the delivery drivers, their monthly income is only about $200. They're really paid very little. So they actually cannot afford to pay $1,600 for a budget stripped down kind of version of an electric vehicle. So there's something interesting that, you know, maybe you'd be interested to hear about, which is the battery leasing model.
I am actually. So
okay.
So those are the delivery drivers. They're making approximately 200. I assume we're talking about US dollars here.
Yes, US
Okay.
dollars, 200 about, which is,
Right.
yeah, about $7 US a day
Right.
is their income for a 12-hour day.
Which is interesting because a sort of a lower end electric bike in the North American market costs around $1,600. So we can understand that those folks would have, that would be quite onerous for them to purchase it. So,
exactly.
but what about office workers or workers in other industries who use, you know, maybe like a scooter or a moped, something like that to get to work, who maybe have a higher income? What about them?
That's a great question. So they may earn twice as much, $400, $500 a month. And they also use the two-wheeler. And you are right, there's no pedaling involved in any of these two-wheelers. I'm talking about an electric scooter or like a small version of a motorcycle. Nothing, no pedaling, no electric bike that way. So the $400, $500 earners also want a bike, but they can afford, or they prefer actually, to buy the bike plus the battery. Because when I get around to telling you about the battery, the leased battery model, it's very interesting. We've identified at least 3 segments. So we've identified the delivery driver whose income is at the bottom of the urban pyramid. They want to buy only the bike body, no battery. They want to lease the battery. Then we have the office worker, teacher, maybe student from a slightly better off family, whatever. They want the bike and the battery, so $1,600. And then we have the higher earners who may be able to spend $2,400 or $2,500 US dollars on a bike, which has a much bigger battery range. They may be able to go for 150 kilometers in one charge of the battery. The bike is obviously more expensive, the battery is more expensive, and they have a different need of battery. So what I'm keen to tell you about is these 3 segments, if we keep in mind the low income delivery driver, the medium income office worker, and the high income, maybe also office worker. What's really fascinating in the Indian electric vehicle market that's just starting up is the treatment of the battery and their different needs, which the manufacturers are now responding to.
Yeah, I'm keen to hear about that. Is it the fact, are the Indian manufacturers coming up? Are they innovating with product that meets the needs of each one of those segments?
Yes, exactly right. And in a very fascinating way. So the delivery driver, let me start with them. They cannot, the other thing with the battery, the reason they don't want the battery is, first of all, the upfront acquisition cost of an extra 800 is too much for them, but that's not the end of it. At the end of 1,000 charging cycles, which could be 3 years if you charge it once a day, like 900 days, or it could be just 1.5 years if you're charging it twice a day. At the end of the warranty period, the battery is likely to wear out and need to be replaced in full. So what they would be committing to if they also bought the battery would be to fork out another $800 at the end of the warranty. So they absolutely don't want that. So they say, get me far away from the battery. So a business has sprung up, which is that a third party owns the battery. You pay a monthly subscription and you can go to a swapping station and pick up a charged battery. Just pull out yours from your vehicle, give it to them, take somebody else's charged battery, drop it in, and keep going for another 50 kilometers. So that's the delivery driver business model. They want a leased battery, or what we call battery as a service. And what we've found is that even though this looks to be the most affordable solution right now, still our calculations show that the delivery driver is spending approximately $87 a month for this leasing arrangement. because he can't pay the $800 upfront, and nor does he want to. But $87 is about 43% of his monthly income of $200. So if you have a single earner in the family who's bringing in $200, and that single earner has only $113 for the whole family for the month left after he pays his $87 for the battery subscription, that's a hardship. So right. My conclusion on the low income, I'm coming to the middle and higher income in a moment, but the conclusion on the low income is that the cost of the lithium ion battery is still a bit too high to be affordable to as many people as needed. In other words, we find that the cost of the lithium ion battery has to go down by about another further 50% in order to be really accessible and affordable to the mass market.
What about the middle and the higher income segments?
Yeah, that's great. A great question. Let me talk about the middle income segment next. This, and what we found, we were not expecting this, but we found out that their needs actually have to do with their ability to park. They cannot, the middle income segment lives in an apartment building with no parking garage or, dedicated parking spaces underneath. So they do not have a place with an outdoor plug point where they can put in a cable and charge. So what they want is they also want the removable battery, just like the delivery driver does. But they carry the battery upstairs with them. It's about the size of a shoebox and it's about 7 kilograms. So they carry the battery upstairs with them and they plug it into an outlet inside their home. And then they carry it back down in the morning and use it to commute. So they need a removable, but not a swappable, is our finding. It was very interesting. They don't want anybody else to handle the battery that they've bought for $800. It's theirs and they want to take very good care of it. And several people in interviews said that if the warranty is only for 1,000 cycles, I think I can take good care of it and let it use it for like 1,500 cycles because I'm going to take good care of it. And then when it's time for me to get rid of this battery, I may either upgrade to a better vehicle if my circumstances improve, or at worst, I will have to buy a new battery, which is okay with me. I can spend another $800 because they are of a higher income category, obviously. So this was their take. They want it to be removable, but they shy away from swappable because they don't want anybody else to use that battery.
And what about the higher income segment?
Yes, and those people have a dedicated parking space and they have a plug outlet in the parking space underneath their apartment building or their private house. And they want a battery that is absolutely not removable. And in fact, that has an anti-theft feature so that they will be alerted through the cloud on their mobile app if anybody is trying to touch their battery. And the battery locks itself. So they need a non-removable and non-swappable battery. These are the higher income people who pay about $2,500 for their Bike Plus battery. And so they want plug-in charging only. Which is very interesting.
Where is the e-bike manufacturing industry in India? Is it close to providing and developing the kind of bikes that each market segment requires? Is it at the beginning of that process, the middle, or the end? And what role is government policy playing in that?
It's very interesting you should ask that. It's really in the last 2 years, since the petrol and diesel prices shot up right at the beginning of the pandemic, when the taxes were slapped onto fossil fuels. That suddenly the market has exploded. It's growing at over 133% a year. And the manufacturers are in fact catering to all three segments. The government subsidy program has been running since 2015, but it was not getting much traction. And now all of a sudden, the subsidies are going both to the manufacturers of the body, the chassis, to the battery manufacturers, and to the buyers, to the customer. So everybody's getting subsidies in a very strong effort by the government to popularize the vehicles. We are now in phase 2 of the government subsidy program. Phase 1 was to encourage purchase. It was basically giving subsidies to everybody, including buyers of four-wheel passenger cars. It just wanted, more electric vehicles. Then the program was evaluated, and they found that if you buy things, but people aren't using them, they're just keeping them parked, then it's not helping. So now they've changed the subsidy eligibility, and it's now for clean kilometers traveled. So now it's really the two-wheelers and three-wheelers that are getting the subsidies, plus the manufacturers and the battery makers. No more four-wheel passenger cars, but for the people who are buying four-wheel passenger cars, electric version with their own money, the government has realized it has to subsidize the construction of EV charging stations. Otherwise, they won't take their electric car out of the house on long trips because of range anxiety. So there's a different set of things being subsidized now, but I would say that there's quite an active e-vehicle market in all the vehicle segments that is happening right now in India.
Right. So if there were, or if there is just under a billion two-wheeled and three-wheeled vehicles that ran on, internal combustion engine, or I guess were pedaled, how much progress has been made in switching that fleet of two and three-wheeled vehicles over to electric?
Yeah, I would say that's not quite a billion, because that's the number of people and they don't all each have their own. But let's say 200 million. I would say the percentage is still very low. It's still under 2 or 3%. The government has a target of 30% by 2030. So it would like 1/3 of all the vehicles in the next 8 years. It would like 1/3 of all the vehicles to be electric, if possible.
And my final question, Mohua, is what about the electricity system in India? This obviously switching over to electric is going to increase the load on the electricity system. Are the utilities and the regulators, the governments, are they preparing for that process?
That's another great question. The utility system, we have either world-class, which is in a few cities of India, and then we have very dilapidated in some of the states, because in most of the states, the electric utilities are owned by the state government, and they haven't had enough investment, or the tariffs have been strongly kept below cost. So the utilities lose money with every unit they supply. So the states which have a very modern and active, advanced utility performance, and Delhi is one of the city states that has that, where it's been privatized and upgraded in the last 10 or 15 years. By no surprise, they are also the furthest ahead in terms of electric vehicles, because their networks can take the extra load. But some of the more, financially struggling electric utilities in various states are far less keen to, provide, for example, an upgraded connection. If you have a current contracted load of, let's say, 60 kilowatts and you want 100 kilowatts, if you're an office with a car park that wants to provide, 10 charging stations, they are not quickly able to do that because they just don't have the funding, the struggling state utilities. So the two learnings that I have from this whole experience of looking into this segment is that most developing countries, I think India is a harbinger of, where other developing countries are going to get to once they start turning to electric vehicles, is that, first of all, affordability. The lithium-ion battery is still too expensive for people with very low incomes. And second thing is the electricity distribution network is not up to the mark in many countries, not just in India. So if we want to transition to retail, we want retail consumers to invest in clean technologies. For example, rooftop solar or electric vehicles, or to upgrade their houses, retrofit and insulate. These are all things that depend on the private consumer making an out-of-pocket payment. Those will depend on having good electricity infrastructure and loans, affordable, cheap loans to get into these technologies.
Was a fascinating insight into transportation in India and the electrification of transportation. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, Markham. Thank you. Nice talking to you.